Okay, so how to perform the rack position then. So when we move from the clean or we come back down from a press overhead, we end up in this vertical forearm position. So we're going to talk about this first a little bit. The reason we say vertical forearm, regardless of the size of the bell, is that power moves in straight lines, okay? That's why our houses are built on vertical stanchions into the ground. That's why if you put a kink in a hose pipe, the water doesn't rush through it anymore, okay? If you straighten that hose pipe out, the water begins to rush through it, and that's when we start getting that power moving in that straight line again. So it stands to reason that we should have bell sitting on the outside and vertical forearm, okay? So, well, the next thing we're going to talk about is the rib connection. So getting the elbow down close to the body again. So we talked last week about when we rack the bell from the top of the clean, we want to make sure that we stay with a tight rib. We want to keep that, elbows tight to the rib, and we want to keep that bell very, very close to the body, okay? Again, this goes back to the weight being right over the base of support. So the bigger the bell, or the wider that circumference gets, the farther away from your body it's going to get, and I don't want to have to hold that miles away from me. It's going to be really, really taxing, and something's going to begin to fall apart. So I'm going to keep the bell as close as I can, just as I would do if I was, carrying a box of books around the house or whatever it might be. Okay? So making sure that when we get to the top, our hand is deep into the bell. So this is one of the fundamental issues that we see happen with people when they clean the bell. They let the bell flip end over end. It comes down, it whacks them on the back of the wrist, and then they hold the bell with this big bend in the wrist. So going back to power moves in straight lines, now I have a kink in this wrist that's just like that kink in the hose pipe. So I'm leaking a lot of power now, okay? I can't really flex this wrist as I go to press, but if I start with the bell, with the handle deep in the fat pad of my hand, essentially the weight becomes an extension of my forearm at that point, okay? So that bell is fully connected to my arm now, so that when I go to press, whether it's an 8 kilo or a 40 kilo, doesn't matter, it still sits in the same position. Forearm is always vertical. So as I go to press, it allows me to go shortest possible distance from A to B, okay? And then we don't need to turn that weight out, start cranking away. Does this look familiar? I'm putting a lot of pressure in on the shoulder and then bending sideways through the spine, a lot of lateral flexion. That's just something that we just want to avoid. And that's a really easy fix. Taking your hand from here with a heavily flexed wrist to driving your hand back into it again, okay? So the only difference there is in between the bottom of the clean when we let the bell fall, when we talked about this last week, keeping the elbow connected to the rib. Once it passes back through the legs and becomes a swing again, now what's going to happen is we're going to start holding the bell into the fingers, just like we would do for a swing. Because when we swing, we don't want to over grip it and have to keep it into the fat pad. So we have to start being comfortable with letting the bell slide from the meat of the palm back into the fingers, okay? So that just comes with letting the bell fall, sliding it back into the fingers, and then as we come up, driving our hand back into the bell to finish in that vertical rack position.